Hello and welcome to the Crypto Corner here on Schwab Network. I'm Jenny Horn. It's time to talk some Bitcoin. To help us break it all down, let's welcome in Nate Peterson, the Director of Derivatives Analysis at the Schwab Center for Financial Research. So as of taping Wednesday afternoon, the Fed kept rates unchanged. Bitcoin prices are now hovering around 97,000. Did we expect any big move in Bitcoin off this news, Nate?
That's a good question. When you come into an FOMC meeting, it's not uncommon to see, those interest rate sensitive type of assets, bonds, gold, Bitcoin, and to some extent financials, even by extension, that you get some volatility around there. But I think, Ginny, coming into this meeting here, expectations were largely, was 3% that we were going to get a cut from the Fed. And so that wasn't a big surprise. I think there was maybe a little bit of negative initial reaction to Chairman Powell basically talking about the risks to both employment and inflation having increased since the last meeting. And, around that same time, we got a headline from President Trump saying that he wasn't going to back down from the 145% tariff rate on China. I got to say, I'm pretty impressed that the market isn't down more than it is right now, given that, we know that Besant is supposed to have discussions with China in Switzerland on a Switzerland trip this weekend. So Bitcoin's been holding up fairly well, I'd say, in regards to this, I thought, potentially kind of bearish to risk assets type of environment that we got both from the FOMC meeting and from President Trump's, comment that he's not going to do anything with China. So we'll see what happens there. Maybe that's just more of the posturing, and that's the way to get the negotiations, to get some traction. That's still up in the air. China's the big one. We know it's a beginning step in terms of that trade negotiation. But if you look at Bitcoin, this 97 to, I'd say, roughly $100,000 area. So, Ginny, we've talked about Bitcoin and the technicals and how they've been relatively benign here, incrementally bullish over the past couple of months. We broke our downtrend from basically January to the beginning of April. We've moved off of that 200-day simple moving average, and now we're up around that 97K area. But very near term, 97 to 100K. If you look back in February, there was a lot of stubbornness for the price to basically, get any type of advance above this level. We were seeing some weakness in equities in the back half of February. Maybe that had something to do with it. But as a technician, you respect price. We're around resistance right now. Bullish technicians would like to see it above 100K.
Okay, and speaking of course, Trump, elsewhere in D.C., the debate does continue over federal adoption of these crypto assets, and the president has come under recent scrutiny for his family's involvement in some of the crypto business. So, difficult question here, but how do investors approach these headlines?
Yeah, it is interesting because, the crypto bulls want this legislation to be passed. We want more clarity around the industry so that it's easier to get access to invest, to know where the guardrails are, etc. And then there's been some backlash because of Trump's basically personal involvement in both his meme coin and then other crypto ventures as well, First World Liberty, etc. And so, look, from the crypto community perspective, based on the reactions that we've seen, I think they love the idea that we have a crypto-friendly president, and we love the idea that we're going to get legislation that's going to be eventually passed, but they probably prefer that President Trump didn't have any personal involvement in the crypto space. It could slow things down. It could be, a little bit net negative, but a lot of the legislate or the law around whether it's a conflict of interest or not, that's still kind of in the air. We don't really know, but keep in mind that with Bitcoin, with the crypto space, there is an integrity to this asset class in that it is potentially a alternative to betting in the U.S. dollar or having investment in the U.S. dollar. And so anything that tends to kind of disrupt a little bit of that credibility or integrity, is generally not favorably viewed by the bulls.
Okay, and I like that, the integrity of this asset class, because we've previously spoken about Bitcoin acting as a flight safety asset. We know China and the U.S. are set to meet this weekend, which markets have taken as a pretty good sign, as you previously mentioned. But if an agreement is struck, how could Bitcoin possibly react?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I say that because if you look at this year has been interesting for the crypto space because of this incoming administration and their stance toward crypto. We've also seen, and that's why it's been breaking out to fresh all-time highs. But historically, it's just highly correlated to risk assets, meaning when we go through a bear market, if we go back to 2022 bear market, for example, the price of Bitcoin, went down 70%. During that time frame. So we come into this year, Bitcoin tracked, basically a 2 beta to the S&P during the month of March. It was down 20% to the S&P's 10%. However, then in the month of April, this is what I think really kind of lit up some of the crypto community, is that we saw some relative strength in specifically Bitcoin. So you can't really point to Ether and Solana exhibiting this same type of price behavior, that Bitcoin really held its buoyancy. And I think that is tied directly to trade. So Bitcoin, what is it closely, or what is it most correlated to? I've seen a number of different charts really trying to capture it, whether it be, tech stocks, whether it be the dollar or M2 money supply, or the Fed balance sheet. There's all of these types of correlations to what is this asset class really tracking to, because that helps a lot of the investment thesis, basically of why the price is going up when they're able to solidify that correlation. So on the one hand, you could say it behaved very well during the month of April. Perhaps it's breaking from that correlation as solely a risk asset. And because what happened in April has to do with trade and the dollar and the theme around de-dollarization, since all of these tariffs are impacting our trade partners who hold treasuries, who have FX reserves. And so on the other hand, you can say when the trade talks are breaking down, so to speak, or it doesn't look like there is a lot of traction there, maybe that will boost the de-dollarization trade, and therefore, if that money is looking for a home, maybe it's gold, maybe it's Bitcoin. So on the other hand, there you could say, well, trade talks break down, then we'll see what happens with the price of Bitcoin. Jenny, I think the big test is going to be that if we do get a bear market in stocks, we did touch that 20% down on the S&P from the peak in April. But if we get an actual bear market where it looks like it's a little more sustained and not so emphasized just by the news, let's see what happens with the price of Bitcoin. It can come down, but is it going to remain above its 200-day simple moving average, or is it going to exhibit that same relative strength? So just because it did so in the month of April, I think a lot of the technicians want to see a little more evidence that that's going to continue in the event of a bear market.
That's absolutely correct. And as we know, unfortunately, past price not always indicative of future performance throughout several asset classes and the equities. So the resiliency has been astounding, and we so appreciate you for joining us and giving us some more color on Bitcoin and the entire crypto space. Of course, Nate Peterson from the Schwab Center for Financial Research. That wraps up this edition of Crypto Corner. If you like this episode, let us know in the comments below. And be sure to subscribe to Schwab Network's YouTube channel. I'm Jenny Horn. Thanks for watching.